So actually, more than who will purchase for a DevTool GTM, what I feel is more important is who is your champion, who will use the tool, who owns the problem. So who is getting most affected with these microservices that are there in your environment not getting tested properly, or who is getting most affected if there is a bug that is reported or you do like 50 rollbacks and hot fixes, like who? And that is what our SDRs do actually. They call everyone and they don't really sell a single feature. All they do is just say, is this your problem? Is this your problem? Okay, this is not your problem, no problem. Okay, let's move on. But if this is your problem, then let's solve it. So I think so that's one thing. Find the person who owns the problem. Then we see two more things, which I think I have learned over a period of time. And more when I worked with Keith Butler, who's a CRO at Observe, where he said, you have to look for the person who can take you to the EB. Like someone who is insecure and trying to do a science project for himself is probably not your buyer, Like, yeah, HyperTest looks really exciting. I want to learn everything. Please send me all the details on Gmail. Or let's have a meeting on Saturday. Well, sorry, if it is not important for you right now, then we are busy with many people for whom it is important. So I think devs are pretty good with this. Like, they don't really muck around. I've usually seen developers say, not a problem. And if they say a problem, they will be open to taking us to their manager. Once they have kind of a bit of confidence, right? Nobody takes everything to their manager. So I've really not felt that devs have let us down that way. But yes, so that, and then one more thing. You do a meeting with one person, and if he's constantly the only one meeting you, he doesn't bring in other people, which means he has no influence in the company. So three things. He owns the problem. He has the most influence, or at least some amount of influence. I've usually seen people like he could just be a tech lead, but if he rallies like 5 people in the next meeting, he's your guy.
Hey guys, welcome to the Modern DevTool GTM Brew podcast. I'm Achintya, co-founder of Reo.Dev and also the host for this podcast. Today we'll talk about 0 to 1 go-to-market strategies for DevTools, and to do that we have a very dynamic entrepreneur here with us. Please welcome Kanika Pandey. Kanika is the co-founder and VP of Sales at HyperTest, low-code test automation tool that makes integration testing easy for developers. Her entrepreneurial journey includes her previous roles as co-founder and CEO of the Modern Health, an organization focused to corporate fitness. She is an ex-Googler and the author of Stronger Than Yesterday, a book I got a chance to sort of glance through some of the pages and found it really interesting. And she talks about the modern lifestyle and enhancing physical health. Kanika, so glad to have you here.
Yes, I'm very excited to be here. Also because we are both alums from the same school, so it's great to be part of your podcast.
Yes. So Kanika, since we are talking about a 0 to 1 journey in this podcast, I was interested in knowing your journey as an entrepreneur from starting with work in Google and then being a co-founder at HyperTest. Did you always wanted to go down the entrepreneurial path?
The short answer to this question is no, because I did not know who I am. And I think the evolution of who I am as an individual got me to be very certain that you want to be an entrepreneur. I think that I met a lot of people, even while at ISB, who were very clear they wanted to be entrepreneurs. I really wish I had that clarity. I only knew something that Epictetus, which is a Stoic philosopher, has said, that if you want to live your life, there are only 2 things you need to know: persist and resist. Persist essentially means do hard things, go chase those goals and have the persistence to do them. And resist is stop getting stuck on cravings, on things, and know when to stop. So getting to Google for me was a hard goal. A girl born in Dehradun probably thought at that time, this will be the highest point of my life and the hardest goal. So I cracked it as that goal. And then when I knew that is not who I was, I decided I have to chase something else. And that chase, the whole persist and resist, led me to being very clear when I was doing Modern Health. And Modern Health did not work out, but I'm not going to go and get another corporate job. I will go and find another founder where I can join in the founding journey. So this is who I am, like someone who didn't know who she was and wanted to be, to someone who's very clear that this is what I will do for the rest of my life.
That's amazing. Let's come to HyperTest. Tell us more about the product. What does the product do, and how do you differentiate in a market where there are potentially a lot of tools?
Yes, there are lots of tools. Tell me about it. That becomes really hard. So HyperTest is a developer tool that is trying to make integration testing and unit testing very easy for developers. That's what HyperTest does. Where HyperTest shines is the fact that you don't have to write a single line of code to be able to test even the most complex things like, queues and sockets, which there is no other platform that can do today the way HyperTest does. So we're a developer tool, and most of our customers that are developers love us, and we are excited to start a journey of sorts.
Got it. That's cool. And Kanika, in the 0-1 journey, defining ICP becomes very important. I remember a story that you told me of how you defined your ICP, because testing tools were always focused on QA managers and quality teams, but you focus on developers. So I think our listeners, viewers would love to listen to that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, just the name HyperTest and test would make anyone believe that, you should be selling to testers, right? Like even a dummy would say you should be selling to testers. And it made integration testing easier, and integration testing in many organizations where developers haven't found an efficient way to do it is being done by testers. So if you built a product that solved a problem for a tester, whom would you go to? A tester, right? But it took us a while. And honestly, more than me, Shailendra and Karan, I hats off to them. Like they started on the journey a lot before I joined them. And they struggled a lot. They struggled. And when I joined, I had full excitement. I have been in testing for nearly a decade. I know all the head of QAs. I'm just going to go and tell them this is what we do, and I'm just going to convince them. Nothing of that sort happened. So how do you define your ICP? You have to fail. Maybe you think this is what your ICP, and it doesn't work out. And what I wanted to add when I was sharing the story with you is that you can have the best relationship. A lot of people emphasize so much in selling on do you have the best CIO connects? Nothing of that sort works. If you don't solve a problem for that particular group of people, it's not going to solve your problem. So we realized it was not working for testers at all. They just did not buy into what we were doing. But every time we spoke to a dev, an engineering manager, an engineering leader, they would get excited. Now, it was hard to get to them. So we had two different problems, right? We can get to someone very quickly, but they would say no. And we find it hard to get to someone who always says yes. So, of course, the answer was, go do the other harder thing where you get the yes.
That's cool. And in this 0-1 journeys, I'm sure there have been failures, there have been successes now. How does this GTM process for HyperTest look today, and how has it evolved? Can you tell us about that journey?
Yeah. So we are very clear now, and we don't go to QAs. We just don't. Like a lot of times, we very politely will guide the head of engineering or the VP engineering who involves the QA team that we are an out-and-out developer tool. So we made a conscious choice. And for anyone who understands this space will understand how hard it is to go and tell a VP engineering who says, I have integration testing which is being done by this guy who is my head of SDET, to say, no, sorry, sir, I want to talk to your developers. So a lot of times we were asked questions, why? Why? And the answer can't be because it works for us. Because who are we, right? So we have to explain to them, why do you need your developers and why does it work for you? So what are the benefits we can give you if your developers get involved? So I think that's the biggest change in what we're doing, is we just don't waste our time anymore. So our qualification is very, very strong. Like if we qualify a deal, it is going to POC. Like we're that strong with our qualification at the moment, or we'll just disqualify.
And that's very insightful. So what goes into defining that? Because I feel that like narrowly defining your ICP in earlier stages is like almost half the battle won. How do you define your ICP? What are the parameters that go into it?
Yeah.
And
so I think it comes with trial and error, Achintya. Like again, and both Shailendra and I are very big fans of Jyoti Bansal. And I think in one of his sessions somewhere he had said, the best way to do this is have a lot of meetings. Like I have been with really fast growing scale-ups like Perfecto and Apply Tools. And I used to always be the highest like record holder for the number of meetings in the week. Here, you just cannot compare. Like I've thrown all those records out of the park because we just do so many meetings. And in every meeting, we ask a few questions consistently. Do you see the value? Is it important for you? Do you want to do it right now? And then we look at the responses that come from a dev, and we look at responses that come from a VP engineer. We listen to the response of a QA. To be honest, today, if you don't tell me the title and you tell me the responses to these 3 questions after a demo, I'll tell you whether it fits our ICP or not. That's meetings, and those 3 questions is how you get to it. I think anyone who says, I always knew about it day one, this is how, I've not met such people, at least, that I knew when I got going, this is what it will be. It will change. And again, whom do you go to first? Do you go to a head of engineering or do you go to an engineering manager? Those are, again, decisions that you make subsequently in the process.
Got it. And that's the definition and the qualification criteria. Tell us more about the top of the funnel. How do you reach out? What are the channels you use? How do you message things when you reach out to them?
Yeah. See, everyone wants to get to the top of the channel, or like I'm assuming you're talking about the economic buyer in this decision making. We are at this moment completely direct. So we've got an SDR team who does a phenomenal job. If they listen to this podcast, I'm giving them a big shout out. They do a phenomenal job. But they're also limited with how high they can go. So usually they'll be able to get someone in the middle management. But I'm actually fortunate to have some SDRs who can even get us top management meetings. So that has not been a complaint. We also use alternate channels, which a lot of people would have explored, like LinkedIn message ads. Few other channels to get to them. A lot of times we may get to them and they may not be right, but that's really not the question you're asking. Largely direct. We don't have a channel partner model. A lot of people have approached me. Do you want to build one? Probably not right now. It's very early.
Also, when the SDRs outreach to, so there is definitely, there's an economic buyer, there's a middle management. How do you guide the GTM leaders at early stages? Because most of the cases they see the buyer might be slightly up the ladder, but the SDR got a meeting with the mid manager. Yes. You might have to move up. In certain cases, you might have to move down because you started with the founder, but then realize that, it's a VP of engineering. So there's always an orchestration, but you get an entry where you get an entry.
You can go to the investor and he will connect you to the founder. Usually it doesn't go anywhere, but this is like it sometimes goes somewhere.
Yes.
So you're basically talking about navigating through the chain to figure out 2 things, right?
Who will purchase? Right.
Who will purchase? So actually, more than who will purchase, for a DevTool GTM, what I feel is more important is who is your champion, who will use the tool, who owns the problem. So who is getting most affected with these microservices that are there in your environment not getting tested properly, or who is getting most affected if there is a bug that is reported, or you do like 50 rollbacks and hot fixes. Like who? And that is what our SDRs do actually. They call everyone and they don't really sell a single feature. All they do is just say, is this your problem? Is this your problem? Okay, this is not your problem, no problem. Okay, let's move on. But if this is your problem, then let's solve it. So I think so that's one thing. Find the person who owns the problem. Then we see two more things, which I think I have learned over a period of time. And more when I worked with Keith Butler, who's a CRO at Observe, where he said, you have to look for the person who can take you to the EB. Like someone who is insecure and trying to do a science project for himself is probably not your buyer, Like, yeah, HyperTest looks really exciting. I want to learn everything. Please send me all the details on Gmail, or let's have a meeting on Saturday. Well, sorry, if it is not important for you right now, then we are busy with many people for whom it is important. So I think devs are pretty good with this. Like, they don't really muck around. I've usually seen developers say, not a problem. And if they say a problem, they will be open to taking us to their manager once they have kind of a bit of confidence, right? Nobody takes everything to their manager. So I've really not felt that devs have let us down that way. But yes, so that, and then one more thing. You do a meeting with one person, and if he's constantly the only one meeting you, he doesn't bring in other people, which means he has no influence in the company. So three things. He owns the problem. He has the most influence, or at least some amount of influence. I've usually seen people like he could just be a tech lead, but if he rallies like 5 people in the next meeting, he's your guy because he can make it happen. And then of course he can bring his manager. So if we look for these 3 things, and honestly, if you don't find them, then you could be just in a long sales cycle without the deal happening.
Right. For early stages, what do you recommend to founders, GTM leaders, that at that point, because you're discovering, like many of the cases, it is a pre-product market fit journeys. What's the stage when you say you can call it quit? Say, okay, no, it's not working. Because at early stages, few things work, few things don't work. And of course, you had your journey. You started with QAs, but then moved to devs, and there were certain learnings involved here. So what can they learn, right? What is a good time to call it quit and change?
It's a good question. It's a good question to a person who actually believes in never giving up. Because I was like, I had huge, all co-founders should have huge arguments. So I had huge arguments with Shailendra on, let's keep chasing QA. Let's keep chasing QA. I will convert the next QA guy, right? But when you do it over and over again and you see it is not working, and if you start applying first principles of how, and you see it's working on the other side, I think that's a good point to say quits to this, right? Like I wouldn't say just quit because 5 people said no. You will know. You'll do it so many times and you'll kind of like see your passion fizzling and you will know. Right. That's how I look at it. I'm pretty sure people have other experiences. I also believe that, especially if you're on a tight runway, you also have to know if you've given more than a quarter to a particular strategy or a particular group of people or a method. Like I'm telling you, quarter is very high in HyperTest. HyperTest, like we change things in every 2 weeks. Like if it's not working, why is it not working? You just have to constantly keep iterating and not get stuck. And that just requires a different level of madness.
Right. No, it's so interesting because, I mean, as I see, they're like at early stage, there are a couple of experiments. There's definitely a primary experiment that would have been sort of talking to QAs and selling there, but there was always secondary, like let's get to developers. And then you started seeing that becoming more important and as a pull rather than what you had currently.
Something like also with developers, right? The fact that we went and started asking them what problem they solve, a lot of developers don't open up. So I actually think that we still have a large majority of our opportunity untapped. And that's why we started looking for new things like, Reo. Like, is there a developer who is looking for something similar to what we do in some other way, somewhere on GitHub? Can I go and speak to that developer? So I think those kind of like thinking only comes when you start like getting deeply involved with solving the problem, which is, who is the guy? Who in this company owns this problem?
Got it. Cool. And Kanika, the last question that I always ask in this podcast is, what are the sources, blogs, any kind of sources that you recommend to early stage GTM leaders for their 0 to 1 GTM?
Yeah, sure. So, I've done long cycle selling, B2B, for a very long time. And my go-to books, if anyone asks me, would be very different from what I would say today. So I think the biggest thing that developer tool companies face is indecision. And there is one book, I kept it here, this one, which I think is extremely good. I would say it could be, if you just apply it very direct of what it says, it can be very harsh. You have to be very subtle in using the language that has been communicated in the book. But I think most customers are open with a direct conversation. Like I've openly asked customers when they've said we would like to build and not buy. I've said, good luck with that. Can we explain to you what it takes to build something like HyperTest? So the Jolt Effect is a very good book. I honestly listen to more Stoic philosophy at podcast, which is also very good for all entrepreneurs, because Stoicism is like the heart of entrepreneurship.
Cool. Thanks so much, Kanika, for spending time with us. This is very valuable learning. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Achintya. Thanks for having me.